Jessie Gray. Welcome to Books. We have a very distinguished New York-based doctor with us tonight, Dr. Benjamin Frank. He's written the book, Dr. Frank's No Aging Diet. He's done a lot more than research a diet on not aging. We'll be talking to him about everything right now. Welcome, Dr. Frank.
Thank you, Jessie.
Dr. Frank, first of all, what is your theory of aging? It simply isn't getting a few wrinkles, is it?
No, well, wrinkles and fatigue and dry skin and sagging skin, and generally, you know, all the things we see, the fading eyesight, the cataracts too, to some extent at least, all of this is part of aging. And what's it all due to? It's due to these secondary changes that follow the primary change, which I consider a loss of cellular energy. Now, what causes the loss of cell and therefore body energy, you know, which feeds the whole metabolism and synthesis, synthetic reactions going on in cells? This is another story, but you see, a cell is just like a brick in a building, and the cell has a nucleus, and the nucleus has in it DNA, and that is deoxyribonucleic acid. It's a form of nucleic acid. Now, around the nucleus, you have also within, so to speak, the brick I was talking about. The nucleus would be like a little acorn or whatever inside the brick. And outside of that, you have the cytoplasm, and in that you have ribonucleic acid, or RNA, which is the primary thing in my therapy, either diet-wise or, well, DNA is also involved in that, but nucleic acids primarily. And when I use RNA, that is nucleic acid in the form of additives, I use it usually in the form of just RNA. Now, RNA and DNA have a lot to do with how the cell functions, what it does. DNA carries the hereditary code. It tells the RNA, in effect, what form it must take to, you know, it makes the RNA. And the RNA, in turn, builds up protein according to the formula originally in the DNA, which we inherit from both
Do
our
we
parents.
lose this as we get older?
No, we don't lose that as such, but that is the totality of it. But there is less DNA. There is less RNA, or at least some kinds of RNA. For example, the DNA that has to do with the buildup of ribosomes, that is where the protein is made. This part is, for example, defective or deficient in older cells. And there are other parts of the DNA that are missing, and the RNA that are missing. RNA is destroyed at a faster rate.
If we renew our cells, though, mainly, they say the body renews itself completely every 7 years. How do the cells become deficient when they are renewed?
Well, you see, we do renew ourselves, but and the cells, we renew this in the body. But actually, I just wanted to explain about the DNA and the RNA making protein and so on. And then you have also in the cytoplasm of a cell a thing sort of in the shape of a peanut, only a very submicroscopic or microscopic peanut. And this is floating around in the part outside the nucleus, so to speak, within this brick I was talking about, or basketball that makes up the organ, which makes up, the organs make up the body. Now, this peanut-like structure is floating around, and it is the energy manufacturing part of the cell. It is known as the mitochondrion. Anyway, what that does is make energy in the form of a molecule known as ATP, which carries the energy. Now, ATP is also, at least in some way, part of nucleic acids. And when we eat nucleic acids, either in the form of food or in the form of tablets of nucleic acid, this eventually is digested, absorbed into the cell, and you provide, so to speak, the basis for the buildup of ATP, because the nucleic acid contains adenine, which is let's say, one of the basic constituents of nucleic acid. ATP is adenosine triphosphate, so adenine, adenosine. Anyway, you're building up more ATP by having the adenosine more available
So
from the intake.
the
of
nucleic acid builds up ATP,
Yeah.
which is the energy factor in the cell.
Yeah.
And you're saying by eating foods rich in nucleic acids, as our bodies themselves, as we grow older, become more deficient in them,
Right.
we can build up a higher level of cellular energy.
Energy, exactly. And this energy, you see, that repairs the damage in cells that's due to or resulting in the process of aging.
Now, do you believe that by repairing the cells or helping them in this manner, we can also help prevent disease?
Yes, as a matter of fact, clinically, I see this all the time. There's an improvement in what we consider normal diseases of aging.
Such as?
One of them is Parkinson's, for example.
Really?
Believe it or not, yes. In
Really?
high doses, on the order of a gram or so, for example, of RNA. The diet I speak about in the book wouldn't quite do the job with most cases of Parkinson's, but it would be helpful. But you'd have to supplement that with RNA in the form of tablets or something.
Are these tablets, ribonucleic acid tablets, RNA tablets, readily available?
Yes, but I would have them administered by a doctor. Frankly, I don't advise people treating themselves, especially if they have serious diseases that should be governed more by a doctor. But I am saying, speaking of my work with this type of thing, there are other neurologic diseases, and in Parkinson's, for example, which is quite common in aging, you get, the shaking and the inability to walk well. It's sort of a stiffness. All this, and this is greatly ameliorated after a month or so with nucleic acids in these doses.
Very interesting. What other diseases would you say it's applicable to?
Heart disease, for example, I mean like heart failure. In other words, where people have swollen ankles and a lot of problem in breathing and so on, have to sleep on 2 or 3 pillows, can't walk very far without a certain amount of pain, or great fatigue and breathlessness.
Is that due to...
This is very much helped by nucleic acids, and the diet I recommend in the book, too, is
Yes, we're going to get to your diet very shortly.
In any event, what does it do with heart disease or with emphysema, which is another condition?
What about asthma?
And asthma, it's the component of asthma that has to do with breathlessness, it helps. The allergic side of asthma, no, not as directly. So it does help asthma, but not quite as clear-cut a fashion
as emphysema
without asthma, and also heart disease, of course. Now why does it help heart disease? And emphysema and diabetes too, where you have lack of circulation in various parts of the body. The reason is that the nucleic acids, by building up this ATP I spoke about before, this energy, in other words, you have available energy and you need less oxygen to produce this energy. There's more of the ATP made with a given amount of oxygen, is what I'm saying. In other words, oxygen's used more efficiently.
Right.
So in effect, you get a certain, let's say, saving on the mileage per gallon of gas. You get a lot of... I did experiments, for example, with mice originally, where you could see how long they would survive. I don't do this work, or didn't do this anymore. After the very beginning, it's sort of an awful thing to have to work with animals to see how long they live. But I had to do this on just a few of them anyway. And then others I did to see, you could see the signs of death and so on, so I stopped the experiment at that point. In any case, before they died. But the animals on nucleic acid-rich diets in a sealed glass jar lived twice as long when the activity was more or less equal. And when it was not equal, when the animals were, say, 2 or 3 times more active, they lived about 50% longer than the ones who weren't on RNA.
When they lived, did they live healthfully?
Healthfully and active, far more than the others.
Really?
So the whole point is that you use less oxygen when you take in nucleic acids, either in the form of a diet or otherwise.
What about cancer?
Cancer, I know there is work, and I've done work myself where I've used nucleic acids. It is in very high doses growth inhibiting. And this property I've applied to cancer and in tests that were done, and it does inhibit tumors. But I don't make this claim in the book about the diet, or for that matter about RNA, but I know there have been studies that show it has an anti-tumor effect.
It's growth inhibiting. It stops the cancer where it is. Does it also make
No, it doesn't
shrink?
quite do that. Inhibiting means slows down the growth.
Uh-huh.
I did not achieve with nucleic acids per se what you call a regression.
That's the word I was looking for.
However, it is in the sense of inhibition anti-tumor. But I don't advise the treatment of cancer with nucleic acids because that's a
Would you
very
advise someone
unproved thing
who
at this
perhaps
point,
had cancer?
even though I've seen this effect.
Would you
What?
say that it was safe for a person with cancer or
Yeah.
any disease, for that matter, to go on your diet, number one, and number two, perhaps take a small supplement of RNA? Would
Well,
that
when
be
I
helpful?
speak of, yes, it's a question of how much and so on. Small supplements, I suppose, in doses of a few hundred milligrams are all right for nearly everyone, except perhaps those with gout, where there may be a rise in uric acid
That
initially.
was one of my questions. What
Yeah.
side effects are there?
There are no side effects that I know of any. No, there are none, except good side effects of having more pep. For example, in winter time, you wear less clothes. And in my experimental work, I was able to go out. This happened in 1960-61. I was able to go out at, well, it was 0 degrees Fahrenheit without even a shirt, with very high doses of RNA I took as powder.
This is you experimenting on
Yes,
yourself.
on myself. And then this.
What were your
same-
very high doses?
Oh, doses I would never dream of giving patients. But I took them myself and also gave in somewhat lower doses to friends of mine who helped me in these experiments. And who
Do
did.
you often use yourself as a guinea pig?
In this sort of work, it's a nutritional kind of work, yes, I've done that, yes, repeatedly.
With no
Fortunately, it's
side
been-
effects?
No, there weren't any. And these were very high doses. In any case, I was able to stay out without any goose pimples or feeling cold or anything.
What do you attribute that to?
Again, the basic reason has to do with this ATP buildup, this energy
Your
buildup.
cells
This
were,
is the
were
key thing in
producing
the
such
cell.
a tremendous
Well,
amount of energy.
Yes, you see, energy
That your
is the key
heat-
to everything.
Body
actually.
heat was very
Yeah.
high?
Well, there is an increased production of energy, ATP, enough for all the body processes, plus an extra amount for the heat we need. You can put it loosely that way.
Now, you mentioned there can be a rise in uric acid, which could produce gout in those people susceptible to it.
Well, let me talk about that point. I'm glad you bring it up anyway, because people with gout should certainly not take this diet, or any diet for that matter, without the advice of a doctor who's controlling them carefully. They have a high uric acid. Now, I'll tell you something very interesting about this diet and nucleic acid tablets. I've often seen uric acids drop.
You have?
Yes, with this diet and with people who have high uric acid.
Because
They
the
drop.
glands are working more effectively, and thus
Well, the reason for that I can only guess at. I assume, you see, when we are on the diets that most people are on, that is diets which are low in nucleic acids, which don't produce enough energy for repairing damage due to aging, and damage which is going on all the time that brings the various diseases that we get due to bad nutrition and other factors, hereditary and so on, combining with bad nutrition. So some will get arthritis, some will get heart disease, others will get other diseases, you know. And there are a whole slew of diseases known as autoimmune diseases, you know, like lupus erythematosus, by the way, which I have helped cases
Have
of
you?
with nucleic acids. And in other words, where the immune system is bad. And this happens again, and they're finding out more and more with diets. Well, they didn't exactly, research hasn't come to this point yet, but this is the next jump-off point, I'm sure. They're finding deficiencies in nucleic acid making pathways in metabolism. In other words, the metabolic pathways that build nucleic acids in our cells are becoming more and more are defective in those people who have autoimmune diseases like lupus erythematosus, scleroderma, rheumatoid arthritis, and so on. Now, when we take in nucleic acids, we obviously circumvent this to a certain extent, in fact, perhaps totally. And for this reason, I believe it would be helpful, and has been helpful, in people with some at least of these diseases to take diets richer in nucleic acids and to take actually nucleic acid supplements.
I want to get to the diet very quickly. First, do you believe that most disease is metabolically based?
What's that?
Is most disease, do you believe,
Disease.
metabolically based?
Most disease.
A disturbance of the metabolism based on cellular deficiencies?
Well, it's probably true that I would say 80, 90, perhaps 95%, I just don't know the exact figure, but the large majority of diseases, I would say, are nutritionally based, yes. In other words, it sounds outlandish.
Nutritionally based, which leads to a metabolic disorder?
Yes, you see, people who, well, I'm not speaking just of scurvy, for example, where you don't have enough vitamin C and you get these bleeding gums and limbs that are black and blue and all sorts of things like that, or beriberi, where you have vitamin B1 deficiency, scurvy's vitamin C deficiency. Beriberi, you get neuritis, pain in the nerves, that is the legs. Your brain can also go a little off because the brain is a bunch of nerves, really, and so on. I'm not speaking of just this type of thing, which is a particular vitamin.
Right.
But there are diseases of let's say, a little more generalized than just those phenomena, you know. For example, heart disease.
By heart disease, do you also include arteriosclerosis?
I'm speaking primarily of that form of heart disease, not speaking of where you're born, for example, with heart defects.
Right.
That's obviously genetic, or at least formed while you're in the womb. But for the most part, I would say degenerative diseases, and that would include cancer, that would include, I believe, cancer. This point is less certain, but I believe that this, again, this I have, it's difficult for me to give you precise evidence on this point, but I have not had any new cancers in people that I've treated, for example, over many years.
Have you treated people who have had cancer, gone into a remission or a supposed cure?
Yeah, I don't personally treat cancer. It's the one thing I don't treat because I hate to take that responsibility unless I'm sure that I have a cure. And I'm not, obviously, at least I'm not prepared to say that. There are people, however, who are better set up than I am, who can treat cancer, sometimes successfully.
Through nutrition and...
Well, nutrition, there are also other methods too. Some of them work on some people, some on others. I don't myself treat cancer, but I do believe that the treatment I do give is cancer preventive to a significant extent.
We have 7 minutes left, and I certainly want to get to the diet, which of course everyone is interested in. We're talking to Dr. Benjamin Frank, the author of Dr. Frank's No Aging Diet. And I must say that he is very explicit about the diet in the book. All the foods are listed.
Yeah, the book goes into the diet very well. And it's basically a diet that's based on foods, of course, rich in nucleic acids. What are those foods? Well, they're fish, sardines are, of course, the richest form of nucleic acid-containing fish. There are legumes like kidney beans, lima beans, baked beans, you know, that's a type of thing. Also are rich. There's spinach, there's cauliflower, there's radish, there's celery, onions. I mean, these are all various foods that are rich in nucleic acids.
In nucleic acids.
Yeah.
You mentioned sardines especially, and I understand several months ago you were on another New York television show when there was literally a run in sardines at the market after you appeared on the show.
Oh.
In fact, the market was wiped out.
Yeah.
And I must say, where I live upstate was also wiped out since we received the same television show. But on sardines, they are smoked fish. And one of my questions was, some doctors say that smoked fish can be carcinogenic. What do you say to that?
If they're heavily smoked, I certainly wouldn't advise eating them.
Just the ones that you can buy
I
in the
would
regular
get them
store.
lightly smoked or fresh, if at all possible. And frankly, I'll say something about that. Everything that has chemicals in it virtually is carcinogenic. And smoking and other things, I suppose, are to some extent. But lightly smoked sardines once in a while I don't think would bother anyone. But if you make a steady diet of things that are heavily seasoned, heavily chemicalized or anything, you will run that danger. That's why I advise fresh fish for the most part.
And also you mentioned organ meats.
Organ meats are fine if your cholesterol is not too high. That's another effect of this diet. It lowers cholesterol
Even though
very
certain
well.
of the foods are high cholesterol.
Even so, but I take caution, though, precaution, in people who have heart disease and high cholesterol. I do anyway give them a low cholesterol, low-fat diet.
It's perfectly possible to have a low cholesterol diet still high in nucleic acids.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, you would avoid the organ meats and stick more to the fish. And
aren't an advocate of just lots of red muscle meats, which are hamburgers, steaks, roasts, etc., the majority of the beef that America eats, are you?
Jessie, I'll tell you something. Not only am I not an advocate of that, but I think that's the cause, actually, of most degenerative disease in this country.
Have you read the work of
meat intake?
The Deficient, the Arctic explorer, who mentioned that the Eskimos themselves eat the organs of animals? It's almost a complete meat diet, but they throw the muscle meats to the dogs.
That's right. The muscles have no health to speak of. They have no nucleic acids. The organ meats have it all. And they are unfortunately high in cholesterol, and if you have a low cholesterol or normal cholesterol, they're very healthy for you in a certain measure, along with the fish and other things. If you have a high cholesterol, I certainly would not take organ meats until the cholesterol is normalized to a good extent. And that will happen with this diet very, in nearly every case that
I'm sure everyone would be interested too. Not only do you internally become healthier, what are the cosmetic effects of the diet?
The diet does reduce the wrinkles to a noticeable degree. I don't say that it makes them disappear, but it does lighten up the wrinkles in the face. It does round them off a bit. It does make the skin a bit tighter. And the skin does have a rosier and more youthful look. It really does.
It can literally reverse an aging skin?
Not reverse it totally, but it certainly can make it look a heck of a lot younger sometimes, and a heck of a lot better, you know. In other words, the skin will look a little smoother, more than just a tiny bit smoother.
What has your acceptance been in the medical profession?
On the whole, doctors are calling me up now, many of them, to find out about this diet and about nucleic acid therapy, which I initiated pretty much.
Have you been able to get your works published? This is a book for the public, but in medical journals. And have you met any resistance?
Well, there have been resistance on the part of orthodox dietitians who aren't familiar at all with this as nucleic acids as a nutrient, and also some biochemists, a very few of them, who have never experimented or have any knowledge of any work with nucleic acids or diets rich in these things. And they have, in the sense of, you might say, almost like a vendetta of people who have preconceived ideas and dogmas. That
Based on complete ignorance.
Yeah. It's like against Pasteur and against other
exactly.
discoverers.
I wanted to read you one of, I did read you right before the show. I'd like to read it for the audience. William James, the 19th century psychologist, and he's considered the father of American medicine, said that there are 3 stages encountered by any new treatment. 1, the entrenched orthodoxy calls it quackery and non-existent. 2, then it is admitted to exist, but is written off as unimportant and useless. 3, finally its foes exultantly exclaim, "We helped discover it." And then they go on to say that Alexander Fleming, the discoverer of penicillin, said, "Penicillin remained on my shelf for 12 years while I was being called a quack by orthodox practitioners." Does that sound familiar to you?
That sounds like a rerun in many respects, except for the last point. It's not yet been reached, but it soon will be, I think.
And it's a rerun of all history.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter whether it's medicine, the arts.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Why do you think this is? Instead of having a questioning mind.
No, I see. Well, this is a whole story of science. I think science is actually not being conducted rightly. And, of course, you have politics, money, and everything else involved.
Right. Greed plays a large factor.
And then the idea of people working a whole lifetime on a set concept of nutrition and biochemistry and metabolism, and suddenly finding it overthrown. I mean, this is too much to take, and I guess many of them react emotionally.
Would you say that medicine is heading toward the treatment of the whole body? A totalistic, a holistic, as they call it, approach to medicine?
Yes, I believe it is. And I think that nucleic acids will be a central part of this approach. That's the point.
Well, I'm not a scientist, but I believe you. I thank you for being our guest this evening.
Thank you very much, Jessie.
We've been talking to Dr. Benjamin Frank. His book is Dr. Frank's No Aging Diet. I think that we're all very, very lucky he published it for the public. I'm Jessie Gray. Have a good week.